Alright, hey guys, and welcome back to another video. So today I wanted to take some time and go through every single North American PS2 game that was ever released that is currently, as of January 2024, going for at least $100. The PS2 is one of the consoles I'm most passionate about and most knowledgeable about, and I hope that this video can kind of act as a resource for those of you that maybe were thinking of picking up some of these games. Is it worth buying? Is it worth playing? What are sort of my insights into why the game is as expensive as it is. And any of the games I've played, I'll offer you up some of my own personal experience with it, and maybe that will help with your buying or collecting decisions. So, what do you say we get started here? But before we jump in, if you are new to the channel, I love doing these sort of price breakdown, deep dive analysis style of videos when it comes to the retro video game collecting market. So if you're new here, be sure to like, subscribe, and check out some of my other videos. But what do you say we get started here? I'm going to start from the top down. So we're going to start with the big daddy of them all. And currently it is still the reigning champion Kuon, which as of right now is the most expensive North American PS2 game. And it is going for, as of right now, according to pricecharting.com, that's the resource we're going to be using, $765. Now, this actually is a bit of a downturn, and I've been keeping an eye on the market for Kuon, and despite this chart here saying that this game was kind of topping off at about $800, $900 in some cases, I actually do think it's probably missing a few price points in there from a year or two ago. I remember definitely seeing this game going for almost $1,000. Now, whether or not that was just people asking instead of people actually purchasing it for that price, but I'm going to trust most of what price charting has here in terms of sales history. And as you can see right here, one went for $969.69 back in actually just January this year, 2 weeks ago. Here's some other copies for $1,000. Yeah, so okay, I wasn't going crazy. There were copies of this actually going for over $1,000 in some cases. So why those are not reflected here, I guess it's just the average price, but keep in mind, there can be outliers. There can be any game in this list can have some just like extreme price swings that may or may not swing the overall average price of this game too much. Contrary to the price of this game, it is incredibly rare, but as you can see, there are a lot of copies that are always selling. So this is one of those PS2 games that is always readily available on the market, and that's actually not always the case with every PS2 game. Now, before we spend too long on each game here, I actually have played Kuon, and I can tell you that, hey, you can make up your own buying decisions. For some people, spending $700-800 on a game is absolutely ridiculous. Luckily for me, I did most of my PS2 collecting when games were, it was outlandish to see a game going for $100 or $200. Those were like the top of the top. So I've never had to even think about spending this much money on something like Kuon. I would say I recommend this if you're a hardcore survival horror fan, if you consider yourself to be an aficionado, you've played everything in the genre, and this is one of the few left that you haven't tried. I would say it is worth playing and trying out. If you're a collector of survival horror games, I'd say it's definitely a nice one to have in your collection. I really enjoyed the sort of ancient Japan style survival horror in here with a lot of like mythical sort of like spiritual aspects to the combat. But of course, this is just a gargantuan price for a game, and this is only for hardcore collectors or survival horror game fans only. Let's move on. Next up is Rule of Rose, the second crowning champion. There used to be a time back in the day where Rule of Rose and Kuon were sort of having a back and forth for which game is the most expensive in the PS2 library. In the end, obviously, Kuon has sort of taken the lead, but I would say that there's a lot more buzz around Rule of Rose simply because it's a bit more common, especially outside of North America. This is a game that does go for quite a bit cheaper outside of the US. So if you can secure a PAL copy, you're probably pretty happy about that compared to the North American copy. This one here has also the Atlas Publishing logo on it, and there are people out there that place a lot of weight behind collecting Atlas games, whether it was developed by them or just published. Atlas was always known for their low print runs, and Rule of Rose was not an exception to this. I think if you were to choose between Kuon and Rule of Rose, I would actually say go with Rule of Rose, just because this game has really stuck with me more than Kuon. It's a very, very strange game, and I haven't quite played anything else like it, being in this sort of like surrealist airship with just some insanely crazy cutscenes and characters and character interactions. Yes, the combat feels like a old school, like early 2000s, mid 2000s kind of survival combat system, but for some people, that's actually quality that they look for these days. Do I see Rule of Rose continuing to climb in price or fall, because according to this graph, it's actually coming down a little bit. There's been some like rumbling around there that this game could actually see some kind of revival in some case. And if any of these games get some kind of re-release, I do actually think the original versions would see a price hit because they are just so expensive. But I do highly recommend this for survival horror fans. All right, next is Xenosaga 3, and this should, I do want to mention that there will be variant versions of games in this video. So for in the case of Xenosaga 3, the price on this one is not for Xenosaga 3 specifically. It's for Xenosaga 3 with the lenticular cover, which is denoted by this here. So if you're a lucky owner of Xenosaga 3 and your box happens to have this fancy lenticular cover, lenticular being, you know, those covers where when you move the box, it'll sort of shift the image and make it look like it's kind of like moving around. That version is actually very difficult to find, and the price on this, I honestly don't think is well, actually, okay, this goes back to 2020. Yeah, this is more in line with what I remember this game going for, about 175, and it has more than doubled in price recently, and apparently it's climbing even more. This is definitely more of a completionist kind of thing. If you're really into collecting all the variants for PS2, you don't got to worry about the lenticular cover, but it just goes to show you how much more money people are willing to spend for just a slight variant. Variant collecting is definitely a thing on any retro gaming console, but apparently it is also not a stranger to the PlayStation 2. We'll see the actual price for Xenosaga 3 here in a little bit coming up. I have yet to play Xenosaga 3, by the way. It's hard enough for me to get through playing Xenosaga 1. I've been trying. I'm going to give it a third shot pretty soon here and see if we can make it to Xenosaga 3. This is the press kit for God of War 2. This one kind of bugs me a little bit because I actually had the opportunity to buy this on Mercari a couple years ago for like $80 or something, and I passed up on it to instead buy a press kit for Lair from the same seller. Yeah, I might have been, you know, a little bit disappointed in myself looking back on it, but this is apparently the highest priced press kit, but this is a press kit that is in the price charting database. I can guarantee you there are press kits that would probably go for a lot more money than the God of War 2 one here. For example, Eco, right? Like the press kit copies of Eco would definitely probably go for more than $400. Haunting Grounds, which, as you can see, had quite the price increase compared to other survival horror games. What actually probably ended up happening here was people noticed how much Rule of Rose and Kuon were going up in price, and they were like, oh, what's this? A somewhat cheap survival horror. Well, I shouldn't say cheap. Even around 2020, this game was, 2019, it was still $150. But right after 2020, as you can see, people are like, what's that? A survival horror game on PS2 that isn't $300? Let's change that. And then it shot up to nearly $400 as of right now. I would only recommend Haunting Ground if you're a very big fan of games like Clock Tower, because it sort of is a spiritual, revival, or I guess we could say not revival so much, but a very similar style of game to Clock Tower. So if you're not really into horror games where you're constantly getting chased and pursued with some really wonky and janky mechanics at times, I got overly sort of frustrated with this game to the point where it did cause me to stop playing like 75% of the way through the game. I do plan on revisiting it one day. Thankfully, this is one that I picked up back when you were still able to get it for like $60 or so. All right, moving on. Guess what? Surprise, surprise. More survival horror. So here's a really interesting one. Look at how cheap this used to be, $30, $40. Once again, 2020 being the just catalyst for most of these PS2 games, especially survival horror, to just shoot up into the stratosphere. I do not recommend that you really buy the PS2 version of this. There is a Wii version that exists for Shattered Memories, and that is the console that it was made for originally. This is actually a port of the Wii game, and from what I understand, it plays quite sloppily compared to the Wii version. The Wii version has some really clever puzzles and use of the motion controls and everything. So how that translates into a controller, I'm not sure. I haven't played this version. I will say, though, that Shattered Memories was an enjoyable Silent Hill game for me, at least on the Wii. And I do recommend that you check this game out if you've somehow avoided this for so long. There's also a PSP version of this that I'm sure is a lot cheaper than the PS2 version. But by all means, definitely check this out on the Wii. Blood Will Tell, a game that I played for the first time last year. Once again, another one that I was very fortunate to get before 2020 happened. I will say, if you're a fan of PS2 era action games, this one is probably a must-play. It's got just some absolutely over-the-top attacks and special moves and bosses, and it's just one of those games that you really rarely see anymore in the current generation. Just a small little contained level that you can beat in 5 minutes, a big giant boss at the end, and just some completely over the top action and combat and blood and gore and all that kind of stuff. However, the downside is it comes with a very hefty price tag, so proceed with caution here. I am not familiar with the source material on this, but apparently if you are, it does add a lot to the allure of this game. Okay, here's Bully Collector's Edition. I can't say too much about this one, but it is yet again another Collector's Edition going for quite a bit of money. Obscure, one of the sort of last horror games that we'll see on this list that are hitting the $300 price range. I have played this. I didn't completely enjoy playing this game single player because you do get an AI companion. It's a game where you can control 2 characters at once. It's apparently highly recommended to play this co-op, and people that seem to play this co-op really enjoy it. I much prefer Obscure the Aftermath, which is the sequel that came out to Obscure, but of course, there's, there's also an Xbox version that you can buy for this, which I do believe is significantly cheaper compared to the PS2 version. But PlayStation and survival horror kind of go hand in hand, and there's sort of like a PlayStation survival horror tax. So even if this is an inferior version, which is a topic I will be bringing up here again shortly when we see one of these next games coming up, sometimes buying the more expensive version doesn't always mean you're getting the best version. Dot Hack Quarantine, I still have never played the Dot Hack series, and I'm very tempted to get into it at some point. As you can see, the price has actually been steadily declining for these, but I can't really comment too much on the Dot Hack series. But if you do own the full, complete Dot Hack collection for PlayStation 2, you're in a pretty good place because some of them go for quite a bit of money. Okay, so speaking of games where if you're buying the more expensive version, you're not necessarily getting the best version, Futurama is a game that is going for usually between $250 to $300, but the Xbox version is slightly cheaper, and it's the better version. It runs smoother with the frame rate. It just looks better in general with the colors, but the most important thing is the performance and the frame rate is better on Xbox, but PlayStation, being PlayStation, it just tends to go for more money. The reason behind that, I personally think, is just because there are more PlayStation collectors than there are Xbox collectors. I think that's just how it is. So more people are likely to buy it on PlayStation 2. And there's more demand for it. It may actually be slightly more rare than the Xbox version, but I can't confirm that. I do hear great things about this game, though. If you're a fan of Futurama, there's apparently it's practically like having lost episodes of Futurama that were never released. So if you're a big fan of Futurama, I would recommend checking this game out, but play it on Xbox if you can. Okay, here's Xenosaga 3, and this is the more realistic price, at about almost half the price of the lenticular cover. So do you want to save $200 on not having the lenticular card on the cover of your game? Then pick up the normal version of Xenosaga 3. Budokai Tenkaichi 3. This is, as we've now learned, the most expensive fighting game on the PlayStation 2, and I have yet to play this, but from what I hear, the reason why it's so expensive is just because Dragon Ball Z fans love this game. There's tons of characters, and it's sort of, I guess, the quintessential Dragon Ball Z fighting game on the PlayStation 2. Another thing to keep in mind here, however, there is a Wii version of this that is significantly cheaper, but I guess there's sort of a stigma in the fighting game community, or just in the retro game collecting community in general, where collecting something on the Wii is usually not super, appealing when you can buy something on the PlayStation 2. Most people would just prefer to play their fighting games on the PlayStation 2. I'm sure there's a lot of reasons for it. People are probably afraid that they're going to be sitting there like waggling like this as they're doing their Kamehamehas. That I can't speak to. But we will see more Dragon Ball Z here on the list here shortly. Okay, so this is one we're kind of just going to skate over, but it is the full bundle for Rock Band 2. For those of you not in the know, this looks crazy. I don't know what happened here, why this game was... No, this can't be right. $17 for this complete... No, there's something wrong here with the data, but all Rock Band, Guitar Hero kind of stuff has been increasing in price drastically over time as people get very nostalgic for these games. There's nothing new coming out for them as of late. And if you're sitting on like Rock Band drum kits and even, heck, singular copies of these games on any console, make sure you're checking eBay or price charting. You might be sitting on games that are more expensive than you actually think they are. This is the the Shin Megami Tensei Devil Summoner 2 Special Edition. I used to have this myself. I did end up selling it, but over time, it has increased a lot. When I sold mine, it was around this price, like $70-ish. and it was before 2019, however. And then, of course, the price has shot up as Persona and SMT in general has seen a lot more love in the United States. Back when this came out, a lot of people here really still did not know this series whatsoever. People were still just in the process of coming to find out about the Persona series and how great that is in the United States. And this just really underperformed, and they printed quite a bit of these, if I remember right. For the longest time, these were just readily available on eBay for like very, very cheap, brand new and sealed. This is Echo Knight Beyond, and this one here I have yet to play. It has seen a drastic price decrease. You can see here in 2021, this was nearing the $300 range and has come down significantly, almost half in price. What attributes to this? Well, I think it really is just the fact that people see From Software as the developer for this. People see From Software. They assume that this is maybe going to be something different than what they're expecting, because this is not your typical survival horror game. This is not some kind of action game. It is a very slow, brooding, slow crawl through a atmospheric sort of adventure game with some ghostly elements to it. I'm speaking very broadly here because I have yet to play this entry in the series, but I think people buy it, they play it, they find out it's not really for them, and then they sell their copies, and it maybe starts to flood the market a little bit. Essentially, they're always being put back into circulation is my guess as to why this would crash in price by almost half. Okay, so here's Dragon Ball Z Trilogy. Now, this one here is going for nearly $200, but what's important to know here, this is not a trilogy between the Budokai Tenkaichi games entirely. It does have Budokai Tenkaichi 1, 2, but it also has Dragon Ball Z Super. If you were to buy all three of those games separately, black label versions and everything complete in the box, you're looking at about $80 to $100. So you're kind of paying a premium here just for the fact that they're all on one disc, and I think at this point you're paying more for the rarity of it than the actual, quality of the full package, I guess you can say. We got a collector's edition here for Growlancer, coming with a bunch of stuff, just completely. Apparently, you're getting like chains and watches and all kinds of craziness. I haven't played this game, so I can't really speak to the value proposition here for wanting to own this, but this is definitely more of a collector's item. One of the last games that Working Designs really put out before they unfortunately went under. A lot of people love their packaging. A lot of people will buy and collect this just simply for the fact that it is from Working Designs. Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence Collector's Edition. I cannot speak to this one. I have still yet to play Metal Gear Solid 3. I know, pretty crazy, right? But for those of you that know me well enough, you would know that maybe that isn't the biggest surprise. Slowly working my way through the series, and 3 is next. And here's Budokai Tenkaichi 3. Oh, interesting. The one that we looked at before had the bonus disc. I actually forget what that bonus disc was, but here's the normal version. Honestly, the price difference between the bonus disc version, which will have a little red banner on the bottom, and the normal version is kind of next to nothing. So don't really worry too much about which version you have. They're very similar in price. Silent Hill 3. The most important thing to know about Silent Hill 3 is that the soundtrack that is included as a second disc does have quite a bearing on the price of this game. So if you own Silent Hill 3 and you're missing the soundtrack, I would say that would drop the price quite significantly. I would say by about 20-25% or so. Silent Hill 3, I think, is on the verge of increasing in price even more. Honestly, anything Silent Hill 3 is probably on the verge of going up simply because of all the new Silent Hill stuff that we have coming this year and in the future. I think this series is going to see a boom like we've never quite seen before coming up soon. Wild Arms 5, this is for the anniversary edition, so this one notably comes in a cardboard box. Very fancy packaging, like a gold foil box that looks really nice. Collectors love it, and this is really it's the last numbered entry, I believe, yes, in the Wild Arms series. I cannot remember the release order in terms of the ones that came out on PSP or Wild Arms XF, so I do apologize for that, but this is really, one of the last Wild Arms entries that we ever received. And it's got a very interesting combat system with a hexagonal grid that does take some getting used to. But if you're looking for an RPG that has just a completely different kind of combat system, I would check this out if you're into Western settings. Now, this has to be pretty rare because this is something that I have personally, I don't think ever seen before, and that's Batman Rise of Sin Tzu action figure commemorative edition. So apparently it comes with an action figure, and that makes this, of course, nearly $170 for collectors. Samurai Western, yet again a Atlas published game. This is one that I have played. I would say that this is the lesser of the two when it comes to stuff like Blood Will Tell, uh, but it's one of those PS2 era games where we really, once again, very rarely get games like this anymore, and I really do feel like that nostalgia from mid 2000s action games is at an all-time high for people, especially if you're a fan of that kind of stuff. We're kind of starved for these types of games, and I do feel like that is what keeps the price on this high, and really not seeing too much of a price decrease. Do I recommend this for the price that it goes for? That's a tough recommendation. I would say only if you're really into Western style games for your video games. Here's the greatest hits version. This coming in at the most expensive greatest hits that currently exists on the PlayStation 2. As you can see here, not too much of a price difference, maybe 30, 40, 50 bucks compared to the Black Label version, and I just generally think that's because most people that are buying Tenkaichi 3 are not collectors, they're players. I think this is a game, and I think the greatest hits is evidence of that. This is a game that is driven by players mostly, people just looking to play Dragon Ball Z Tenkaichi 3, Budokai Tenkaichi 3. So yeah, it's a combination of collectors, but also I think more so players, because the fighting game community and people playing fighting games these days is probably at an all-time high. This is also something I don't think I've ever seen before. Star Wars Battlefront Action Pack. I'm not even sure what this comes with, but this has no price history. It's kind of just sitting on here. Apparently, it's sold one per year for 160. Gotta be pretty rare. I've never seen this before. Def Jam Fight for New York. I hear great things about this game. I have, no interest in whatever the source material is that this is based on. Bunch of rappers and stuff and hip hop. I don't know anything about that world of this game, but I do hear as a fighting game, it's pretty good. And I do look forward to playing this one day. But there is a greatest hits version that does exist. However, that is not as cheap as you may think. Followed up by another fighting game, Marvel vs. Capcom 2. This one is so nostalgic for me because there was a time where games like Marvel vs. Capcom 2 were known as, some of the rarest and most expensive games in the PS2 library. I'd say, right around maybe this time, 2019, yeah, when a PS2 game going for $70, $80 was, pretty unusual. Most PS2 games, outside of some of the horror stuff, were not really that high. Back around this time does seem about right. Seeing a PS2 game that historically once went for about $40 used, $50, $60 used, that was highly unusual for the time. Most PS2 games that long ago were pretty cheap, and it has kind of carried that torch as still being a apparently at one point over $200 fighting game. I think I was playing this on Dreamcast though. I think I rented this. Super fun game, not something I'm personally looking to try out anymore these days, however. Tulip, one that I also played for the first time last year. This is a game that may probably or most likely will receive some kind of an HD re-release. But there was a point where this game was up to $250, and then it saw a huge price dip in 2022 by almost $100. Now it's kind of stabled out at around the 170 to 150 range. I will say that this is one of the strangest games I think I've ever played, not just on the PS2, but one of the strangest games I've played in general. If you're into like really weird niche Japanese games, you can't go wrong with Tulip. This is available digitally on PSN as well, so if you don't want to own a physical copy of this, that is a route you can go down. But it's just a game about kissing people and trying to impress the girlfriend of your dreams. And in order to impress her and, kind of go out with this girl, you got to work your way up by by kissing a bunch of people in this village and working your way up from being a poor kid in the town to sort of gaining notoriety. And it's just completely crazy. Check this game out if you haven't. You probably won't regret it. Here's the greatest hits version of Def Jam. Not too much of a price difference. If anything, the price is almost exactly the same as the Black Label. Reason being, I do believe this game is driven by players more so than collectors. And they don't care if it's Black Label or greatest hits. Now we come into the Armored Core games. Armored Core games, as you can see, have seen a drastic increase. Now, it's not a 2020 increase. The price barely went up on these. It came around thanks to the revival of the Armored Core series with Armored Core 6. I mean, look at what happened here. Just completely ballooned. Will these prices permanently hold? I think if you don't see any drastic price decreases within the next year, then yes, these will probably be the new prices for the PS2 Armored Core games. Some of them have come down significantly though, like Armored Core 2, Armored Core 3. Why? Because those games are not actually rare. They're pretty common, so once that initial spike of interest wears off, you will see the games come down in price. But games like this, like Nexus, that are actually pretty rare, you may never see them come back down ever again. FIFA 14, this one might surprise some of you, right? You're like, wait, hold on, FIFA 14. But think about this for a moment. Look at the year on this game. The PlayStation 2 was discontinued in 2012. So this game came out like a year or two after the PlayStation 2 was pretty much already done for in North America. But keep in mind that the PlayStation 3 came out in 2006. So this game came out long after we already had the PlayStation 3. So it is a game that is, as you can see, very much probably just dominated by collectors looking for what is probably one of the rarest PS2 games, I would assume, where the price is only slightly lower than you would expect from one of the rarest PS2 games just because it is a FIFA game. There's only so many people out there looking to buy and collect these. So this is either just going to hardcore FIFA fans or more so completionists that are looking for anything rare on the PS2. Here we have Devil Summoner 2, or the full title, which is one of the craziest and longest games on the PS2. Shin Megami Tensei Devil Summoner 2 Raido Kuzohona versus King Abaddon. Yeah, that's a mouthful. So I have yet to really delve too much into the series. This is one that I have played. This is the standalone version that I did dabble in, a little. I'm sorry, I dabbled in the first one a little bit. I have yet to really play the second one. Whether or not it's worth these prices, I am not sure. But like I said, anything SMT these days is just shooting up in popularity, especially in the United States. Steambot Chronicles. Actually, I've got my copy right here because I'm about to start playing this next week. Part of my PS2 Roulette challenge that I do on my streams on Twitch. Really excited to jump into that for the first time. I hear really good things about it. So this game here has drastically gone up. Seen some dips, seen some climbs, seen some dips. It's a really cool looking mech action RPG that apparently blends like a bunch of different genres, and I can't wait to see what the fuss is about this game. There's a lot of people out there that I've talked to over the years that are like, this is one of my favorite games of all time, and I can't wait to find out why that is. As you can see, this game used to be dirt cheap for the longest time, and then of course the 2020 boom has seen that change a lot. This one takes me by surprise. I was completely unaware that this is apparently $120, $140. Like, what? It's only based on 2 sales. If you guys know a little bit more about this, is this like a super low print run PS2 Greatest Hits game? I haven't really kept up with PS2 Greatest Hits entirely outside of the big ones. So yeah, I would love to know if you have any ideas to why this is as expensive as it's showing here. I'd love to know why. The more you know, right? Shrek the Third Greatest Hits. Shadow Heart's not for resale. So this is really interesting here because what this means is, for those of you that are unaware, when Shadow Hearts Covenant was getting ready to release in GameStop, they ran a promotion where if you pre-ordered and bought Shadow Hearts Covenant, they would actually give you a free sealed copy of Shadow Hearts. And what did you end up getting? You ended up getting this not for resale version. So if you ever wondered why this is not for resale, this is one that just people got for free with Covenant. Pretty cool, right? You were pretty lucky apparently back then if you took them up on that deal. There's no other difference other than it having this little thing on the box that does say not for resale, so it is a variant that you can tell the difference. And price-wise, apparently this is a bit more expensive than the normal version because we haven't seen the normal version yet. I'm not sure if it's going to be on here. It should be because Shadow Hearts is definitely going for more than 100 these days, I believe. This is the normal copy of Wild Arms 5. Quite a bit cheaper, about $100 cheaper than the collector's edition. Silent Hill 2 Greatest Hits, which is pretty much neck and neck with the Black Label Greatest Hits. If you're more of a player, I would recommend that you get the Greatest Hits version because there is some extra content in here that I won't spoil for you, but there is extra content in the Greatest Hits version of the game that is not present in the Black Label version, as at least what I've been told. I've only played the normal version. And following that right up, $1 cheaper is the Black Label version for Silent Hill 2. Now, this is a really interesting one to kind of keep an eye on. It's hard for me to nail down what's going to happen to this. Is this going to go up in price? Is it going to come down in price when this remaster finally gets released? I think the remaster is going to be different enough that it will still make people want to play this one ahead of time and kind of be able to compare and contrast the differences or even revisit it after they've played the remake. So I'm kind of in the camp that this game will see a price increase when it comes to us learning more and seeing more and even playing the new Silent Hill game that's coming out. Silent Hill 2. Here's Devil Summoner. Oh, we got to do the full title here. Hold on, let me take a sip of water for this one. These titles here. These titles here are pretty long. Shin Megami Tensei Devil Summoner Raido Kuzohona versus the Soulless Army. Pretty similar in price to the sequel as well. Silent Hill 4 The Room. Pretty crazy that this is now the cheapest Silent Hill game. However, for the longest time, it kind of was. It was sort of like the outlier in the series. It's sort of a love-or-hate game. I also played this. It is to this date, the only Silent Hill game I have played that I have not been able to finish. I won't spoil it just in case people are planning on playing this for the first time, but there comes a point in the game where you sort of reach this revelation that, okay, you're nowhere near done with this game. That's the moment where I just had to nope out. I couldn't deal with the loop, essentially, that was going on in this game. Really cool. Love the atmosphere. I do really feel like over time people will, start gravitating towards it a bit more than they have in the past, because if the new Silent Hill games are not what we're hoping they're going to be, and let's face it, with that mobile game that came out last year, it's not off to a good start. I feel like people might start gaining a bit more of an appreciation for some of these older school Silent Hill games that maybe weren't the most favorable in the past. Oh, I do forget though, Origins, Silent Origins is actually the cheapest one because we haven't seen that yet. God Hand. Infamous for its, 3 out of 10 IGN review. I have not played God Hand since I bought it used at GameStop for $4.99 or whatever the heck it was. I do really would love to revisit this game now and see what I think of it. And for the longest time, those bad reviews, as you can see, kept God Hand down quite a bit. Developed by Clover Studios, rest in peace, Clover Studios. A developer, that made Okami, has gained a cult following over the years. And God Hand still holding pretty strong. Some price dips, some price increases. That is a game I just never foresee going below $100. It's kind of got that cult status and a low enough print run that it's not something you see all the time. Okay, this is a super interesting one, and you're probably like, wait a minute, I got this game in my collection. But hold on a moment here, there's a reason why this is so expensive. This is Ed, Edd n Eddy Misadventures with bonus disc. So this is really important. As you can see here in this photo, there are 2 discs, and there is a way to tell if your copy is this. Well, obviously, there's a way to tell. Open your game and see if you have 2 discs. But if you're looking at photos online or on eBay, on the back of the box, it'll actually say, oh, with bonus disc, which has some exclusive DVD content or something along those lines, like developer interviews or creator interviews of the show, something like that. And it brings this game from being about $20 to $30 to well over $100, because this is actually really rare. So if you ever see this out in the wild or in an eBay lot or an eBay listing, keep an eye out for that bonus disc because it's worth a ton of money. Persona 3 FES. It's so crazy to watch the price on this one because, wow, it's kind of been all over. This is for the limited edition. There was a point where FES was really almost bargain bin status, which is crazy to think about. Maybe not the collector's edition, but the normal, regular copy was getting printed into oblivion at some point, and you can find it anywhere and everywhere. Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance Adema bonus CD. I am not actually sure what that means, but once again, just one of the more expensive sort of variants with a little bonus disc that is included. Guitar Man, one of my favorite PS2 games, one of my favorite games of all time. Believe it or not, this was back when this kind of first came out, a few years after it released. It was one of the rarest, most expensive PS2 games. It's actually one of the first PS2 games, even though the prices here don't go back that far. This is one of the first PS2 games, along with Rez, to reach that $100 threshold. I just remember thinking to myself, it was just bananas that this game was going for over $100 at the time. It was almost unheard of on the PS2. And then it received a sort of soft, sort of secretive reprint at GameStop. Suddenly, the 2 rarest PS2 games, and it might have actually happened to a third, maybe even Marvel vs. Capcom, I don't recall, but I do vividly remember Rez and Guitar Man sort of going back and forth as being one of the most expensive games on PS2, around $100. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, GameStop gets sealed copies without the security seal on top. It was just like regular shrink wrap. And they just straight up re-released these games back into the market. It probably was a pretty low print run, but I do remember that. If any of you remember that, let me know in the comments below. Let me know I'm not the only one remembering this. And that did bring the price down on Guitar Man for, as you can see, It brought it back down to sort of like the $50-$60 range. And then in 2020, as people started, revisiting their childhood and games that they missed a lot, obviously it saw a big price increase. But I will tell you, if you are a music rhythm fan, Guitar Man is a must. I just replayed this again recently, and it still holds up. The music is just so good. The story is great. It's just a timeless music rhythm game. A must play if you're a fan of the genre. Okay, here's the normal Shadow Hearts, and as you can see, it is ever so slightly cheaper than the not for resale version, and yeah, worth every dollar. Such a unique combat system, and there is a slight little variant that you can keep a look. There's a third variant for Shadow Hearts. I wanted to make a video on this on like PS2 variants and stuff that you can keep an eye out for, but there is one that actually has a hint book, like a little hint guide inside the box. That's the same size as the manual. Really rare to find that, so keep an eye out for that. Wild Arms Alter Code F. This one, definitely apparently one of the longest hour-wise RPGs available on the PS2. It's apparently quite lengthy. Wild Arms seeing a bit of a revival of interest as people start to, in my opinion, kind of just look for those old school RPG series that have turn-based combat that they're just not getting anymore. And Wild Arms is one of those games. This is a remake of the original Wild Arms, sort of redone and retold for the PS2. Silent Hill Origins. I actually really enjoyed Origins. I thought this was a pretty fun romp through like a little spin-off Silent Hill game. It also has a PSP version. I would say if you're a big enough Silent Hill fan and you've never gotten around to this game, I'd say it's worth it. Is it as good as the other Silent Hills? I'd place it above Silent Hill 4 for me personally. Armored Core 9 Breaker. I also want to point out we are now getting into the territory where games are sort of skating that thin line of $100, 100 or above or 100 or below. So at this point, you might see games like that in some instances, are going for under $100. But hey, we just got to go with the data that we got here. So keep an eye out. You might be able to get these games going forward a little bit cheaper than 100. And in some instances, there are some games that are going for like the $90, $80 price range where sometimes they do break 100. Unfortunately, we're just going with whatever price trading has priced at $100 and above, not even the $99 games, just to, be absolutely consistent here. So Ninebreaker is apparently like one of the worst Armored Core games from what I've heard from fans. This one is essentially some kind of glorified tutorial kind of game where it was built upon online multiplayer and there's not much going for it in terms of story missions and everything. I've been told to proceed with caution with this one, but it is quite rare. Here's Persona 3 Limited Edition, non-FES version. Obviously, most people are going to want the FES version, or FES, I think they call it. Dot Hack GU Rebirth Collector's Edition with a figure. You guys know how those go. Pretty rare. I don't think I've ever seen this before in the wild or even on eBay, but maybe I just haven't been keeping an eye out for it. That's $108. Gundam, Mobile Suit Gundam, Gundam versus Zeta Gundam. That's a lot of Gundam. That's 3 Gundams in the same title. Of all the Gundam games that are on the PS2, I've done a bit of research on this one, and it is apparently the worst of the bunch, according to most people. The reasons for that, I am not 100% sure. It's apparently a very long, repetitive game that kind of banks on you using a bunch of different mobile suits and doing the same levels over and over and over and over again with a lot of space combat. That sounds like a lot of Gundam games out there, but for some reason this one is just not super well received. But it is by far one of the rarest PS2 games. At any given time on eBay, you may only find a few copies of this game complete in box. I think there was a time I looked and there was only a single copy complete in box available for sale. So this one I think is being carried by just the enormous Gundam fan base, and there's just not enough copies to go around for the demand of people wanting to own all the Gundam games. Not really much to say about the Guy game. This is a game that you probably only want if you're going for a complete PS2 collection. Do your research into this one. It's it's not a game that you probably want to buy. R. Tenelico 2, Melody of Metaphalcia Limited Edition. Once again, limited editions, especially RPGs, are, it's usually typically a minimum of $100, give or take, most of the time. MS Saga New Dawn. So this is a Mobile Suit Gundam turn-based RPG. Now, before you get all excited, because most people actually have not heard of this game, I have played it, and I will tell you that it does suffer from high encounter rates and really long, drawn-out battles. However, if you're a Gundam fan and you're kind of thirsty for some turn-based combat with a bit of a chibi style, not complete chibi, it's not like Mobile Suit SD kind of stuff, it's sort of a cross in between. You might find something here that you like, but you got to be prepared for a quite lengthy, quite slow, quite drawn out battle system, but there might be something here for you. We've got Grand Theft Auto Stories Double Pack, Liberty City Stories, and Vice City Stories going for $100. I imagine the only reason this is going for this much is just because it's a scarce compilation. Obviously, you can get both of these games separate for probably a chunk of change cheaper. Final Fantasy XI beta version, this is kind of interesting because you can't play this game on the PS2 anymore. So this is definitely a collector's piece here, and if we look at the price history, the prices on this are just so wild to look at. From $13 upwards of $200. I'm not sure what the heck is going on here, but it is apparently averaging just above $100, so we got to mention it. I'm a huge Final Fantasy XI fan. Did I play in the beta for the PS2 version? I did not. I did buy that giant box, though, that came with the hard drive and everything, obviously, to play it. But it's just kind of interesting to note that if you did take place in the beta, and back in the day, if you took place in a beta on the PlayStation 2, they would have to send you a physical disc, which was kind of neat. All right, we're getting into the bottom here, the last two games. The most expensive Suikoden game on the PS2 being Suikoden 5, which has seen a nearly 100% price decrease, going from $200 down to $100. This is definitely an all-time low for this game since the 2020 breakout in price for this. So if you're looking to pick up a copy of Suikoden 5, this seems like a good time to do it. And before we get to the last game here, I just want to thank any of you. If you made it this far in the video, 40 minutes, I really do appreciate that. Remember to leave a like. It really helps the video and the algorithm reach more people. And subscribe if you're new to the channel and you want to see more videos like this. I will definitely keep making them for you guys for other consoles as well. And our final game, eking out just above $100, is Silent Line Armored Core. Once again, one of the more uncommon Armored Core games that is just about breaking the $100 barrier. There are other PS2 games that are just under the $100 threshold, so if you'd like to see a video of me talking about PS2 games maybe between $75 and $99, hey, maybe we can do a follow-up video talking about those games, because I've played a ton of them, and I can kind of give you my perspective on those games as well. So if you guys enjoyed this video, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.